And good evening, everyone. We're just going to wait one more minute so we can allow some of our attendees to get into the meeting, so hang tight. Okay, well, it's 6:01, so we will go ahead and start the meeting. Just in terms of introductions, my name is Angela Foose. I'm the Assistant Director for Development Services here at the City of Reno. Also joining us is Lauren Knox. She's a Senior Planner with Development Services. We also have Lance Ferrato on the line. He is our Business License Director. So he's there if you have questions related to business licenses that Lauren and I are not, I would say, in the know about. So he is there if needed. So I'm going to go ahead and do a shared screen with our group. There we go. Okay, so hopefully everyone is intended to be here. This is for a discussion on City of Reno zoning code and regulations specifically related to live entertainment. So our goal for today is to give you an overview of what the rules are today and to talk about what's working and what's not working. And are there some changes we can make, and would that make a difference? So we went to City Council earlier this summer, and we talked to them about some of the concerns we're hearing, both from residents that live near live entertainment and from the businesses and the operators that run with live entertainment, and the challenges that we're hearing from both sides. So council took in that information. They said, you know what, let's go out to the community and get some additional feedback, but on specific topics. So we're going to go through that today. So first of all, the kind of the big thing is, well, what is live entertainment? So from our perspective, from a zoning code perspective anyway, live entertainment is any kind of activity that involves singing or dancing. It could be trivia, it could be poetry reading, any kind of live performance. Just as an example, if you go to a bar and there's music in the background, are people doing anything in terms of are they dancing? Are they singing? If they're not, it's not considered live entertainment. It's just the music in the background. Similar to if you went to a grocery store and there's music being played through the speakers, that would not be live entertainment. But it does become live entertainment when people are singing or they are dancing or somebody's playing a guitar or there's a band playing. If there's a DJ, that is a live person performing some kind of entertainment. So that would be considered live entertainment. So generally speaking, those are the things that we're trying to regulate with our live entertainment regulations. In terms of what the rules are today, this is specific to our zoning code. We have probably 5 or 6 things within our zoning code that say, here's the rules on this topic. So number 1, if you have a business and you have live entertainment and it's after 11 p.m., then you have to go through what's called a conditional use permit. If you have live entertainment up until 11 p.m., you don't have to go through that process. So if you're a restaurant and you have, somebody playing the piano in the background, that is allowed by right until 11 o'clock. So once you hit 11 o'clock, that triggers you into this new kind of category that requires approval of a conditional use permit. Likewise with outdoor live entertainment. So if you have a restaurant or a bar and maybe you have a patio and you have a band playing or somebody just, playing light music or strumming a guitar, if it's outside, the limit is 10 p.m. So you can have outdoor live entertainment all you want, but once 10 p.m. comes, we do require that you go through that additional conditional use permit. And then separate from those two categories is what we call kind of one-offers or special events. So let's say you're a band that comes, we just had one last weekend, and they came and they had a music festival that played on the Believe Plaza in downtown Reno. That was a one-time special event. So they have different rules. And so you have to go through a different permitting process. It's just a one time you go through it. We do have some businesses that say, you know what, I want live entertainment and I want to go till midnight, but not every night. Maybe I want to do it 3 times a year. So you wouldn't need to go through that full conditional use permit process. You could just do the special event or special activity permit, again, kind of a case by case. But in terms of that conditional use permit, some things that are useful for everyone to know is that that runs forever with the property. So it's not transferable when you move from one business to another. You basically get it approved and it runs forever with that property, regardless of who the owner is. So other rules that we have specific to the indoor live entertainment. We do have regulations that say if you're doing indoor, you have to close the doors and the windows at 10. And the idea is that when you have doors open and windows open and there's, either a DJ or a band or something playing, it's loud. And so trying to be respectful of any residents that live in the area, we do require that you close your doors and windows. We also require that you have to put together a queuing plan. Now, this isn't intended for everyone that does live entertainment. It's for anyone that a business that has live entertainment where you're going to have people lined up to get in. So if you are, again, a coffee shop that wants to have, poetry readings till 1 o'clock in the morning, you probably don't have a line of people trying to get in versus if you're a nightclub and you have people lined up all night coming in and out. So that queuing plan is really more for a safety perspective. What we don't want is people lined up on the sidewalk and getting rowdy or not paying attention and kind of falling into the street. Then it becomes a hazard. So we do require, if you are going to have people lined up to get in, that you have a queuing plan, and typically you would also have security to help manage the people lined up to get in. Separately then, if you have the outdoor live entertainment and you're a business that is within 150 feet of residentially zoned property, we do require that you get a conditional use permit. We don't have a lot of these uses throughout town. Typically you would see it in more of like a suburban kind of area. Maybe you have like I'm going to say a Bullies. I can't think of one in particular that has an outdoor patio that plays music outside, but potentially you could have a bar or a restaurant that has that live outdoor entertainment outside, and you're maybe next door to houses or to apartments. And so we want to make sure that we are doing things to kind of mitigate those impacts and protect those residents that are next door. We have kind of a fairly new process that we've been working on just within this last year. When we have a conditional use permit come in, and let me just walk you through that real quick if you've never gone through that process. A conditional use permit, it costs about $5,000, and that's a fee that you pay to the city. It's a one-time fee. And we take about 3 months to review your application. So we go through with our fire department, our police department, business license, our code enforcement, planning department, and we say, okay, what are the issues that we're seeing with this use or potential issues that we could see? And how do we address maybe any concerns that we would get, whether it's lighting or noise concerns, again, kind of the queuing. If you have people that are going to be lined up to get in, how has that been addressed? So we're now requiring also a security plan, and that security plan runs with the business itself. So if the business comes in and they get their conditional use permit, and again, that runs forever with that business, but let's say business number one, the operator goes away, and a new business comes in, they have to write their own security plan. So that security plan does not live forever with that piece of property. It runs with the business that's operating in that building. So if you have, for instance, a business that's a nightclub and they get their security plan approved and then they go away, and the next operator comes in and maybe he wants to do something that's less impactful than a nightclub, he would have a much different security plan. So some of the things that we're looking for is big picture from a safety perspective. How are you handling your security team? If you weren't having a security team, is your staffing trained? What are the procedures in place if there needs to be an evacuation? If there's a fight that breaks out, if somebody has weapons, those are the kinds of things that we're looking for is, do you have protocol in place to address those concerns? And then we also ask you, again, tied to your specific business operation, how are you handling hours of operation? How long are you planning to stay open at night? How are you handling bands? Any of those specific requirements. And so you fill that out yourself. You prepare your security plan as the business operator. And then our city departments look at it. One of the big ones is our police department, our code enforcement department, and our planning department. Just making sure that, again, we've addressed things that are going to be potentially a challenge for the neighborhood. Lighting is always a big one. If you have a business and you want to have bright lights, we make sure that your lights are at least shining down and shielded. They're not shining up. They're not shining in somebody else's business or somebody else's home. So those are the types of things we look for in a security plan. We do have a checklist. And so these are, again, the minimum things that we would be looking for. And every business is unique and different. So we'll look at it on a case-by-case basis. But we let the operator put together the plan that best suits them. And then we run it through all of our different departments to make sure they're comfortable with it. Again, and talking about that conditional use permit process, some of the concerns we've heard from the business community is that it's expensive. To apply, and it's non-refundable. It's about a $5,000 fee. So you submit an application to the city, you pay that $5,000, and it's not refundable. So if you don't get approved, you don't get that money back. So that's one, it's cost. Number two is the time. It takes about 3 months to go through that conditional use permit process. First, you have to go to a neighborhood advisory board where you get input from the neighbors. And then you have to go to a planning commission, and they either recommend approval or denial, or they can make changes or conditions or new restrictions that they want to put specific to your location. So there's a component of uncertainty. A lot of times when you're a new bar operator, you're on a limited budget anyway. So now we've added $5,000, 3 months worth of time to be able to do these things. And the uncertainty of, am I going to be able to get the business operation plan that I want? Or are things going to be restricted that makes this business no longer financially feasible for me to operate? So from a concern perspective from the businesses, I would say, are there things we could do to make it easier on the businesses while also, again, kind of protecting that neighborhood to make sure that we don't have just wild and crazy businesses out of control and there's just chaos running, and look out. So some of the challenges that we've seen across the board has been with enforcement. This is nothing new. This is something I think we've been dealing with for decades, and we're always trying to find new ways to improve. We have kind of 3 different layers of enforcement. Number one would be our police department. So they do not enforce our zoning code. They do not enforce our business license code or our from a code enforcement perspective, right? They follow their own rules and regulations, and they're really focused on safety. So that's a big thing for them. From a business license perspective, we're making sure that business license, all the rules and regulations are being adhered to. From a code enforcement, they look at what rules we put on you from a conditional use permit perspective and from a zoning perspective, and are making sure that you're enforcing those. So just as an example, let's say we have a requirement for that queuing plan, right? So that line that says we have people coming in, we know they're going to be standing in line outside. Who's enforcing to make sure that it's not chaotic and unruly? So on one hand, the police department's out there from a safety perspective. Now, they don't have a copy of our zoning code that says, oh, here's the rules that are in place to make sure that you're handling your line safely. Our code enforcement team would help work on that. But our code enforcement team is not out at midnight on a Friday night or a Saturday night to even be able to enforce those rules. The other challenge that we're finding is that if every business has a different set of rules, how is anyone supposed to know what to enforce? So again, challenges from an enforcement perspective. Live entertainment, it's a big topic and everyone operates a little differently. So it's difficult for all of our enforcement team if everybody has different rules. Some of the things we're trying to do to improve this process. Number one is when you come through for that conditional use permit, we're trying to give everybody a consistent set of rules and regulations and conditions of approval. We went back and we looked at some conditions of approval from 10 years ago and 15 years ago. And some of the rules that we put on buildings back in those days just don't even make sense to us. And we think, why did we put those rules on that business? But there was obviously a one-off or something unique and different. Just as an example, we have some businesses that can go until 4 a.m, and then they have to stop live entertainment. Maybe there's a business next door that can go all night. So it's very difficult if one business literally next door to each other can go all night with live entertainment, and the operator next door has to shut it down at 4. We have other conditions of approval that say, well, on Wednesdays, you have to shut it down at 2 in the morning. On Thursdays, you have to shut it down at 3 in the morning. Fridays and Saturdays, you can go till 5 in the morning. So again, from an enforcement perspective, from just a consistency perspective, it's just not working. And I will say that from a city standpoint, it's really, really tough for us to enforce rules that are not consistent across the board. Secondly, things we're trying to do is, again, now we have put in place that you have to do a security plan when you do live entertainment. And that's only if you trigger live entertainment after 11 o'clock at night. So if you're a business that is a bar or restaurant and you don't have live entertainment, you don't have to have a security plan at all. If you are doing live entertainment, but you shut it down by 11, you also do not need a security plan. So again, kind of the rules in place today, are they working? Are they not? Are there things that we could do to do this better? So when we talked to City Council earlier this summer, they said these are really good, thoughtful questions. You know, we're kind of at a challenging point, I would say, in the city in terms of coming out of COVID. We have a lot more people living in the downtown and midtown area. We also have a lot of new businesses in our downtown, midtown area that want to come and want to kind of create that energy, that 24-hour energy, or even just live entertainment. So we're running into kind of a rub between people living in downtown and businesses trying to operate in downtown, you know, past 11 o'clock at night. We do have different areas in the city where we allow businesses as a whole to be open after 11 o'clock at night. And those areas are Midtown, downtown, 4th Street, really are more active urban areas. The rest of the city, you have to close your business at 11 o'clock at night unless you go through a conditional use permit. So if you're in more of a suburb type area, you are required to close your business at 11 o'clock at night, just all businesses, unless you want to go through that conditional use permit. So where we have these corridors, I would call them more entertainment areas, where we allow you to be open and operating 24 hours a day. Does it make sense to add that additional requirement that says, well, you can be a bar and you can operate 24 hours a day, but if you're going to do live entertainment, we're going to add these extra rules if you want to do that past 11. So again, it's this conflict of, we want a vibrant community. We also want more people to live here, but we don't want to have to keep people up at all hours of the night. That downtown and midtown is their home as well. So how can we do this better? So 2 things. Should we allow live entertainment by right? Citywide or just in certain areas or not at all? You know, should we keep that conditional use permit requirement or should we change that? And then when it comes to the security plan, right now we only require that security plan if you are going through a conditional use permit. So for your average bar or business that's operating and maybe you're grandfathered in because you've been there for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, you don't have that same requirement. So the question is, should we require all businesses that do live entertainment to have a security plan? And again, each one's going to be a little different, but right now we're only requiring that if you triggered going through that conditional use permit. If you do have live entertainment, you would have a separate license for that, like a business license. We call it a cabaret license. And you do have to go through an annual review. So maybe the question is, if we want all these bars and restaurants and businesses with live entertainment to have to go through their own security plan, maybe we make that due at the time of annual review. Is that something we should do or not? Same with questions on enforcement. We've had at least one bar in the last 12 months or so that we had repeated calls for service, meaning 911 was called quite often for fights, for drug trafficking, for sex trafficking, for underage serving to minors, a number of things that were breaking the law and causing problems and calling the police to be called on a regular basis. And so it took quite a while of trying to work with them and trying to get them to be better. And at the end of the day, the bar is no longer open. And so that was, I would say, a specific case of maybe we had a bad actor and we didn't want to bring down the entire bar industry because we had one bad actor. And so are there things that we could do to, again, not penalize the existing bars, but for the bad actors that aren't able to kind of, figure out how to make their security plan work and how to make their security in general work. So we shouldn't have to be getting 911 calls every weekend for bad behavior. Should we be tighter on enforcement of some of these types of businesses? So one concept that's been brought up is, should we do like a 3 strikes and you're out? We'd have to come up with some kind of metrics of what's considered a strike, so to speak. Is it just because somebody called and said that bar is being really loud, does that count as a strike? That wasn't the intent with this kind of conversation. It was more of, when we see repeated bad behavior, again, things that result in calling 911 calls, are we able to tie it to that particular business? Or is it just maybe that weekend we had some bad customers that were out and that was the last bar they went into? So while it may sound easy to enforce this 3 strikes and you're out, we're still kind of struggling with, we don't want to hurt any existing business just because occasionally they have some bad patrons that come in. So next steps, we do have a community survey that we have put out, and we're asking the community to give us some specific feedback. We do ask, hopefully everyone that's on this call, you can go into the chat box and there's a link to the survey. Encourage you to fill it out, send it to your friends. If you're a business owner, we would love to hear your input. If you're a resident anywhere in the city, we would love to hear your input. If you're a visitor and you're new to Reno and you're like, wow, this place is awesome, I want to provide some input, we would love to hear it. Bad feedback is also accepted. So we're going to take that feedback and go back to council, likely in November. We don't have a specific date yet, but probably November. And then we'll share that information with council and figure out what direction they want to go. If it turns out they do want to make some changes, know that that's not instant. We do have to go back through a long kind of public review process. We go out to the neighborhood advisory boards, we go to our planning commission, and we go back to council. So it's generally a 4 to 6 month process to get anything newly adopted or changed when it comes to zoning. So it won't happen overnight, but this is kind of the first step in that process to figure out, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And how do we make it better? Up on the screen now is my contact information, foose@reno.gov. If you have any questions, or you need a link, or you need me to send you something by email, feel free to shoot me a message and we can get that out to you. Like I said, we're probably going to be collecting this feedback for the next month or so, and then going to council likely in November. So the more feedback we get from you over the next couple of weeks would be greatly appreciated, and help us to really just give a more informed decision-making process for city council. All right, I'm going to do a stop share, and Lauren has the ability to bring you over if you want to provide questions, comments, or feedback. And again, encourage you to click on that link in the chat so that you can fill out the survey and go from there. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, so anyone who wants to speak, go ahead and raise your virtual hand, or you can use that chat box to enter any questions or comments that you might have. So we'll go ahead and get started here with Tyler. You're unmuted on my end. You should be able to unmute now.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate it. My main question was, what do we have in place to coordinate with the city council once a business goes through a process, to get this conditional use permit? And I asked that because, we recently, paid the $5,000 to have this, application process take place. And not only was it 3 months, it was more along the lines of 6 months. And after going to the neighborhood advisory board meeting, going to the planning commission, going through all of those, and having city staff recommend we be issued a conditional use permit, at the very end, Vice Mayor Taylor just denied our permit with essentially no findings whatsoever, which I have an email to prove. So I just want to, see what are we doing to coordinate with council, so when somebody, spends $5,000 of their own money, and doesn't get it back, and plays by the rules, and goes to the neighborhood advisory board, goes to the planning commission, goes to the city council, and we still get denied and said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. With again, no findings, just that somebody decided they're not going to give us a permit. I think we should establish, more of a transparent, method to have everybody on the same page. So somebody, doesn't spend 6 months and, in this case, tens of thousands of dollars to meet a dead end.
Yeah, and I think Tyler, that brings up a really good point, just for anyone that is not kind of aware of the process, that conditional use permit. So our zoning code requires that after 11 o'clock at night, or if you want to do live entertainment after 11 o'clock at night. So in this case that Tyler's talking about, they had submitted their application, then they went to the required neighborhood advisory board and got input, and then they went to the planning commission. Planning commission votes on conditional use permits, and that decision can be appealed. So whether the planning commission approves or denies it, that decision can be appealed, and then ultimately it's up to city council. And so in this particular case, planning commission approved their conditional use permit, and they added a condition limiting the hours. So I think it was till 3 a.m. is what they said they wanted to limit the live entertainment hours. And so the bar itself could be open all night because they were in an entertainment area that allows 24-hour bars. But they wanted to have a live entertainment past 3 a.m. and that limitation was put on them. So this is probably a really good example to say, is that process working? So in Tyler's case, they appealed that decision. Again, it was approved. They wanted to get longer hours to be able to do live entertainment. And that decision went to council. And at that point, council just denied the entire conditional use permit. So that goes back to the uncertainty issue, where it is difficult from a business owner perspective to spend that kind of time and money, and at the end of the day, end up with nothing. So yep, they can have a bar, and that bar can operate 24 hours a day, but they were not allowed to do live entertainment. So here in kind of is the challenge. Some of the feedback from the residents that lived nearby were concerns about noise and some of the illegal happenings from a previous bar that had been open at that location. And so there was concerns that maybe this particular location wasn't right for live entertainment after 3 o'clock in the morning. But that, I think, goes to the whole point of this discussion of it is very, very tough in this town to make a business survive. Are there things that we as a city can do to help those businesses? And would it have changed if instead of a conditional use permit, maybe we put in some different rules that you had to follow, or maybe we put in something in the security plan that was specific to this business that ensured that if bad things were happening, or if the bar was operating in a way that was illegal or doing something wrong, do we have other enforcements tools that we could have used to go after if they were a bad operator, rather than saying you don't get a chance at all to even show if you can be a good or bad operator. So I think that's a great example. And unfortunately, Tyler, you kind of ended up on the bad side of this situation. But it's a good kind of learning case to say, was that an effective process? Could we have done that differently? And so I think in this case, it's a question for you, right? How could we have done it differently or different? How could we have made that a better process that gave you guys the ability to open and still gave the residents the ability to have some enforcement? So if things were bad, what could the city have done to ensure that some of those bad things weren't happening?
All right. I don't know if I still have audio, but I appreciate you taking my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. So next we have Dale. You should be able to unmute on your end.
Can you
Dale,
hear us?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say Dale? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, hi. So I'm a Reno City resident out on the west end of town, and I live across from a business that's a wedding venue. They play outdoor DJ music. They have a cabaret license apparently. But it's reached a point where their outdoor music is dramatically affecting my quality of life in my home. I can hear the music comes right through the walls. My bedroom window is about 150 yards away from their outdoor patio. During the webinar, you had mentioned cabaret licenses needing to go through an annual review. I'm wondering, I have contacted business licensing on this issue, provided a video of the noise I'm hearing coming into my bedroom, including live music and whooping, hollering, screaming, celebrating, etc. Got that in motion this week. But what is the process for citizens and residents to provide input on how they are impacted? In this case, it's not a downtown area. I'm out on West 4th Street. I'm not in Midtown. I'm not, near the hotel district. The business is surrounded by homes on at least 2 or 3 sides. And I understand they'll provide their input when they're applying for their cabaret license or during the review. But what about input from the neighboring residents who are impacted by this? And it's not trivial. It's causing substantial stress for me personally.
Yeah, so I don't know the specifics on this location, so I'm going to give you a broader answer. Within our downtown corridor, we do not have noise ordinances, and it's based on what the neighboring property is zoned on as to whether or not we regulate noise. If you are in an area, a residentially zoned area, we do have noise regulations. And so on one hand, if you're in an area that's all single family homes, it's probably zoned for single family. There are rules in place today that you could say, hey, you can file a complaint. We would go out there, or a code enforcement team would have to go out there, not at that moment, but they would, pick the next weekend and go out there and measure noise. So that would be one thing that they could do. And then they would cite the business if they're exceeding the noise regulations. I guess the other thing we'd have to look at is that wedding venue, are they permitted to be doing outdoor activities? I don't know if it's every weekend, it's more than 6 times a year. So we would have to take a look to make sure they are meeting whatever they are licensed to do. And again, with that outdoor entertainment, technically, if it's outdoor entertainment, they're supposed to shut it down at 10 o'clock at night, and that's citywide. But if they're not licensed to have outdoor activities because they're within 150 feet of single family or residential zoning, then we would also tell them they have to stop and they have to go through a conditional use permit because they trigger outdoor entertainment within 150 feet of residential zoning. So I would say Dale, send me an email so I can get your contact information, and then I'll follow up with our business license department and we'll get the details on where the venue is and kind of figure out what's going on.
I greatly appreciate that. I have contacted business licensing. They started a case
Okay.
Recently, but so that's sort of in process. I just had questions about, how my voice gets heard as a resident who's being substantially impacted. And in terms of frequency, this has escalated to 3 to 5 times per week, 3 to 5 nights per week. Outdoor music, with bass and things that travel right through walls, right into my bedroom. So I greatly appreciate that. I'll contact you. I don't want to consume more of the audience's time, but significant concern for me, and I will contact you on it.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
I think this is, thanks, Del. We won't make you talk anymore, but I think just maybe for the broader group, this is also some of the feedback we're getting citywide, and also in the downtown areas. If you live anywhere in the city and you are up, all night or even till midnight because there's a booming bass sound coming from your neighbor's business, it is very, very difficult to function and to sleep and to be able to get up and go to work the next day, or just to get up and do your, day-to-day duties. So this becomes a challenge that we're struggling with. Is we know there's residents that live in downtown and midtown and throughout Reno. So how do we kind of marry those two up of, yes, we want thriving businesses, but we also know that people need to live and to be able to sleep in peace. And are there things that we can do to make that better? So in this case, it sounds like Dale probably lives in a single family zoning, residential zoning. So we have different rules in place that protect the single family zoning. Downtown is different because downtown is not residential zoning, it's a mixed use zoning. So our regulations on noise and 24-hour activity is different. But I think that's a good perspective to bring to this discussion, that it's not just the downtown residents that are impacted by noise and that base. It could be citywide. So that's good feedback. And again, these are the kinds of things that we want to hear and be able to share with council.
Great, thanks again.
Okay, I don't see any other hand raises. Oh, let's see here. Mary, you're unmuted on my end.
Hi there.
Hi.
So Mary Babbis, I've listened to all three of your webinars this week because I was interested in what type of feedback you were going to receive from all persons that are listening. In a webinar, it's really difficult to see versus being in person. I prefer the in-person, just to let you know. But referring to your survey, since this is going to be the tool that is being used for you, what you're submitting to council, wanted some clarification on number one. It talks about a $5,000 application fee. I'd like to know, and I'm sure you have a pretty good idea, since there's so many departments involved in that process, what does it actually cost the city of Reno to process one of those CUP applications?
Oh, that's a great question. Each one is different, case by case. We had somebody on earlier that said that they applied for a conditional use permit and it wasn't a 3-month process. It was more like 6 to 8 months. We see that a lot depending on what the project is. So some cases are very simple, they go quick. Other cases, we get a ton of public input, and there's a lot of time spent on phone calls and researching code enforcement complaints. So everyone is different. That $5,000 goes into our general fund. So again, we definitely lose money. We spend more money on staff time than we do making money. So these aren't like big revenue generators. If we were doing truly like a pay for your service, it would be a lot more.
Okay, thank you for confirming that. I like the idea of a conditional use permit in that it requires public comment. Are there other, if you were to take that off the table and make it a licensing requirement, or it used to be a special use permit, what type of availability, how much feedback can public provide at that point when it's taken out of that environment for us to actually have any input?
Yeah, if it's something that's just going straight to a building permit, let's say it's a new building being built, there is no public input process. It just goes straight to a building permit. We make sure that they meet all the building and planning and zoning regulations. There's other types of reviews. So a conditional use permit is, again, 3 months, requires going to the neighborhood advisory board and planning commission. We do send notices. I kind of left that part out too, but anytime we have a public hearing process, we send postcards. And so that information goes to the neighbors to alert them. We have another process, more of a minor conditional use permit. So instead of a full conditional use permit, it's a 30-day review process. So it does not go to planning commission. It does not go to the neighborhood advisory board. We'd still do send notices, so you'd still pay a fee to apply. We would still send notices to neighbors so they could provide input. And that would be before we issue the approval letter. So from that perspective, it's still money from the operator's perspective, right? They would still have to pay a fee. It's slightly less than $5,000, probably closer to $3,000 or $4,000. But that does not require a planning commission approval. That decision letter staff writes, and that can be appealed, and that appeal would go to city council. If we wanted to get rid of conditional use permit altogether, then there would be no really public input process. You would just get your cabaret license. That does require city council approval, but it's not something where anyone is noticed. It's just put out on an agenda. So that makes it tough too, because a lot of times the public doesn't even know a new business is going in. That, most of the time people aren't watching where cabaret licenses show up on a city council agenda to see what it is or the details on it. So that makes it tough.
Okay, on number 2, it's a little conflicting in the wording on your survey versus what was in your presentation. Because the survey says the city currently requires a security plan for all businesses, which my understanding and based upon your slide, it should be all new businesses, just for clarification on that.
Oh,
that
thanks for
correct?
that. Yep, no, that was a mistake. It's conditional use permit. So your general business that's just coming in for a cabaret license does not need a security plan. When you apply for a conditional use permit for live entertainment, that's when we trigger a conditional use permit. So I apologize, that's my fault. I didn't provide enough clarification on that.
Thank you. And then number 3, when you talk about stricter enforcement, for bad operators, what type of stricter enforcement are you, considering? I'm challenged by this as a downtown resident and actually as a property owner of both residential and commercial, because I do have tenants as well. Because you talk about 3 strikes, you're out, but then there is illegal operators in the street, aka food cart, our lovely hot dog vendors that are
Yeah.
challenging. So, on Monday, a speaker had brought up a good point that, once something goes out onto the sidewalk, they can't control that. And right now, the city's not enforcing licensing requirements of those food trucks, and it's making it very challenging for both the businesses and the residents. So, we're not giving a level playing field to the business owners by allowing non-business owners to conduct business.
Yeah, and one of the questions that city council brought up is, do other communities do, and they specifically kind of talked about a 3 strikes and you're out. We have a lot of operators that, let's say we go in 1 month and maybe the police is doing an undercover kind of sting for serving underage. And so let's say we cite a bar because they're serving underage. And then 6 months later, we go back and we cite them again for more underage serving. Or, what we're finding is that a lot of times these businesses, the bad operators, don't do better. And so should we do more to say, okay, we gave you 12 months and you had consistent 911 calls. We had to go into your business, 6 times in the last 12 months. Should we be saying 3 strikes and you're out? Should we put together some kind of metrics to say, we don't want to just continue to have to keep showing up without any repercussions? Or are we okay with that?
So
And
as a
really-
property owner,
Yeah.
are you noticing them as well? Okay.
And so that,
Because it's challenging as a,
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, because it's challenging as a landlord, because we are so limited in what we can, how we judge tenants when they can come in, what's permissible by law for us to, somewhat discriminate against. And so sometimes you do get stuck with a bad operator, and then the landlord is troubled by the whole process as well, and their hands are bound. So it's not just the not just the business owners and the residents that are challenged. It's also the property owners that need to have a big say in this as well.
And I think that's another good point is if the police show up and they arrest somebody because there's fighting inside the bar, that's not necessarily the business owner's fault or the operator's fault. It could have just been they had a customer that was ruly and out of control. If that continues to happen, let's say every other weekend, at that point, do we say maybe it's the bar operator who's not doing a good enough job of controlling their customers? How is it that one bar has 911 calls every weekend and the bar next door doesn't? So that's where, again, we're kind of asking the question, should we be doing more from an enforcement perspective to try and push out the bad operators, or at least give them some repercussions to say, we are continually coming to your bar with 911 calls. do better. And if you don't, we could take your license away. Is that something we should be better at?
Okay, and then the last question I have, thank you everyone for your patience, is how is this survey being submitted to council? I noticed that it's a very generic survey. You don't even have to put your name, what's stopping someone from, answering the same, no, 100 times, just to confirm the, reliability and validity of this survey in general, if it's being used as a tool for their decision making.
Yep, so we have found kind of pros and cons. When we do surveys, we can ask very targeted questions. And so in this case, council said, go forth and get me specific input on these topics. So a survey worked well because we knew specifically what they wanted us to ask. We also have the ability to say, provide an email with your thoughts and input. So sometimes we get, 100 random emails that have nothing to do with what we're talking about because maybe there's confusion on what this topic even is. So it's hard for us to really put that forth to council other than here's, 100 different emails, read them all and figure out what to do. So our goal in this case was to say there was very specific questions that council had. We're going to ask that. We also have an other category. So if you want to provide other comments or feedback, you can do that. So our goal is to be able to take all that information, whether it's a long email, whether it's specific to the questions we asked or something else related to live entertainment. We'll be able to put all of that together in an Excel spreadsheet and in just actual emails that we can give as public comment and share that with council. So you get to kind of do the best of both worlds. One is we have a survey which has a very quantifiable answer, here on a scale of 1 to 5, here's what everyone said. And then also the ability to throw in the other option where you can just provide other comments that we didn't target or specifically ask.
Okay, thank you again for all your time this week. A lot of effort, appreciate the press. It'd be interesting to know how many people actually are attending these, just to see how active our community is.
Yep. Thanks, Mary.
Sure.
All right, and next we have Maribel. You should be able to unmute on your end.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, great questions, Mary. Going back to one of the questions that was discussed regarding the 3 strikes policy, I'd like to just, can you explain how this might work in practice? Specifically, what kinds of No, okay.
I'm going to tell
So
you, we are looking for input.
Got it. So yeah, basically just wanted to find out a little more about that. So if it's open for discussion, just understanding, what kind of violations and which department would decide that.
And that's, that is another kind of quandary. It sounds good in theory when, when somebody threw it out as, why aren't we doing more to enforce? And how come we don't have like a 3 strikes and you're out policy? So in theory, that sounds great. But in actuality, what do we enforce? And so that's where we're struggling. What are the things that would constitute significant enough to say, we've been to your business, whatever the metrics is. We've been called, 6 times in the last 6 months. That's strike 1, or is that strike 6? These are the kind of things that, does this make sense? So we are going to look at other communities to see how they better deal with enforcement. It's not easy. It's not black and white. I would say we're finding no jurisdiction is alike when it comes to live entertainment. We tried to find cities that are similar to Reno, meaning more of a 24-hour,
Of course.
activity, and we are unique. So
Yeah.
we too are struggling with how do we better handle this. The other side to this is just resources. As we said, our code enforcement staff, we have to pay them overtime so that they're not on a regular schedule to be out at midnight, where police, they're out 24/7. So that's, it's different for police because they are already out, they have shifts. But it got dark. Our code enforcement and our business license team, they work your typical Monday through Friday hours. So it's fine if we decide that we're going to just start doing more enforcement through code enforcement or business license, but understand there's a cost to that. And the city is struggling with, financially right now. So is that something that council wants us to spend more money on? And kind of a question, if we found a way to make it work and make it easy, we would definitely, throw that out to council as some options, but we're finding it's not easy. So if you guys have ideas of what you think would be fair, especially from the the operator's perspective. Because I understand that you have customers that, you know, you can't control sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's things where, again, when it's repeatedly over and over again, and you know, we've probably all been to those establishments where you walk in, you're like, oh man, I can see the fight's getting ready to start out, you know, just walking in, you can feel the vibe. So how do we not hurt the good businesses, but really just try and get the bad actors to do better? Are there things that we could do to help kind of encourage them to be better about some of these, you know, underage serving, the weapons, the fights, over serving, drug trafficking, sex trafficking? Those are the challenges that we're trying to prevent and kind of discourage from being in Reno.
Understood. Then I guess we'll have to do some brainstorming and come up with some solutions for the next meeting.
Yeah. And again, I mean, those are kind of things that if there's things that you like or you don't like,
Yeah.
put that in the other comment, because we are, like I said, we are open to input right now. We don't want to be so strict to say, nope, this is it. These are the rules. We definitely just want to say, does this work for Reno?
Absolutely. I appreciate you holding this, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Oh, Tyler, you should be unmuted on my end.
Good evening, Angela and Lauren. How are you?
Okay, great.
You were almost there. It was almost like 9 o'clock, 7 o'clock, getting a little dark on the screen. So a couple other people brought up some different things, and Mary brought up, you know, with the conditional use permit, and she brought up a really good point on some, if we do use an analogy kind of thing, where the conditional use permit allows other people, residents, businesses, the public to weigh in on someone's business. But if we put that analogy saying, oh, hey, we're going to say, if you're going to buy a home or an apartment next to me, that we get to weigh in on you as a resident, that seems a bit unfair. And like you said in the beginning, each business should have the opportunity to open, conduct their business, and then there is a process to see if they are bad actors. You know, if a resident gets to choose who their neighbor is as a business, or even the person buying the home or the condo next to them, we're really getting into slippery slope kind of territory. I feel like, you know what I mean? It could go both ways, right? And like we have, you know, those HOAs, or there's different boards you're allowed to get criticized to even get into a building. And then the other gentleman that talked about the noise ordinance out on 4th Street. And as you said, we have certain zones that already exist within Reno. And so I think most of this conversation that people have to understand is we're kind of really talking about entertainment within our core zones, being 4th Street, downtown, and Midtown, which is a 24-hour commercial use zone, and by right allows live entertainment and to serve alcohol within those zones, and that the current code actually took away by right that right. But Wells, South Reno, North Reno, West Reno already has zoning and planning in place that allows the curbing of noise, activity, late night activity. So the real conversation, I think, about this live entertainment code is, what is Reno going to be? Are we going to allow entertainment through our entertainment corridors that currently exist? And this isn't really a conversation about South Reno, North Reno, you know, the different kind of outer banks outside of these corridors. And I think most people need to kind of really understand that a bit. You know, and I want to reiterate once again that when we do ask somebody to leave our establishments, if they've come in already drunk or overserved and we ask them to leave, or if we've noticed they're drunk and we ask them to leave, they go out onto the streets, they're usually not happy, they're triggered. So often those people end up in front of other businesses or bump into the next person, which then ends up being the fight, and not necessarily that bar overserved them or wherever they were coming from. And so people have to also understand, and Mary said it, you know, when they're on public property, we cannot enforce those people. We can't touch them for liability reasons, insurance reasons. That becomes the city of Reno's police, RPD, or code enforcement's issue, not the businesses. So a security plan doesn't necessarily help that, you know, unless it's within the four walls or on the private property of that business, you know. And I think most people really need to understand that that's the hard part for a small business owner that is faced with some of these problems, that we're not able to touch these people, that we're setting us up for a lawsuit or lack of insurance to be even to operate, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. A lot of times you are being a good operator if you tell them to leave your establishment, and then sometimes it comes back to bite you because then they get into a fight in front of your business and it looks like your business was the problem, but you were the one that chose not to serve them and kick them out. And it comes back to look like it was your fault.
Right, which then ends up becoming a problem with you're called to our business, you know, and
Yeah.
I do understand there are bad operators, and it becomes clear when it is a bad operator, you know, but it's a slippery slope, and especially, you know, like I'm really part of the LGBTQ community, and if there is different people or policies in place that could discriminate based on gender identity to get a business closed or fined or 3 strikes based on their not supporting their ideology, you know. So it's
Yeah.
really difficult to make sure that the code and the law protects everybody based on ethnicity, race, and sexuality. And that has to be discussed within this code so that it is not arbitrary, and it cannot be discriminated against.
Great. No, absolutely. I think that's a really good point of, you know, the idea of 3 strikes and you're out. Let's make sure we're all clear on what constitutes as a strike. Strike 1 or 2 or 3, and make sure we're not discriminating or do anything that's unfair to the business operator.
Yeah. And thank you guys again for hosting these for the last 3 days and for the survey. And we look forward to taking this to council.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Okay, next we have Cindy. You should be able to unmute on your end.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi there. So Tyler made some very good points. So a couple of things. First of all, I want to talk about the city of Reno for a moment. When you think of the city of Reno, or basically any larger city in Nevada, this is an area, even though tourism has gone down, we are an area where people come to have fun. They expect live entertainment. They expect areas in town that are designed for them to go to, that they can, for lack of better words, bar hop, go from here to there, have fun. That's the fun corridor. That's the downtown. That's the midtown. Okay. And people expect to see that in Reno, and they expect to be able to cut loose. And a lot of people come here for that reason. I mean, I know we've changed a bit as a town and a city, but we are still that. Okay. And so I feel that if we start tightening up that stronghold, we're going to lose people coming to this area. We just will. We need tourists. So when a tourist comes into my bar, one of the very few things I hear them say is, you know, we're here because we know we can have fun. We can't do that at home. You know, we're not Utah, we're Reno. Okay. We're not Salt Lake City. We're not, you know, I'm sorry. If anyone is there, that's a Mormon. We're not Mormon country. We are Reno, and people expect us to have what we have. As far as someone moving into downtown Reno or Midtown, you know, it's only fair to say that they should be, when they're ready to buy that piece of property, that they get explained to, hey, you know, you need to understand, if you're living here, this is what you can expect. This is an entertainment area. Okay. Tourism comes here. People are bar hopping. People are doing whatever they're doing. Okay. And they're out late at night, and especially the weekends. Okay, they need to understand if they live there, they are knowing what they're getting into. We shouldn't have to change what we're doing for a few people. I understand that sounds inconsiderate, but it's inconsiderate to tourists, it's inconsiderate to the bar owners, all of these things. Okay. Secondly, back to the security thing. I run 5 security guys every single Friday and Saturday night. Does that stop people from coming in and raising hell? No. I can't control who comes in my bar. However, when they come in, I have them searched. We have a sign on the door that says no outside weapons of any kind, no pocket knives, no mace, no guns, no weapons at all. Okay, so, and we also say we're going to search your bag. So ladies know when they come in, everything's being searched. Okay, so I agree that that should be handled. I think someone should do that to protect everybody. However, when you have a bunch of people in there having fun, I'll give you an example. I had a guy come in, his ex-wife was there with another guy. Okay. Wouldn't leave after we noticed there was some tension arising from the situation. He refused to leave. So I have to call 911. Okay. In that same weekend, because it was rodeo weekend, I had to call 911 4 times because I had an abundance of people in town for the rodeo. So you guys are just very correct when you say, how do you monitor this?
Yeah.
I'm not a bad actor. I do everything. I have everything in place to run as much of a safe business as I can. Okay. But things happen. And so there could be 3 months go by and I don't have to call the cops at all. But then there could be a week where I've got to call them because I've got someone I need to trespass, or, we've cut them off and they're mad. And so they start getting, crazy with everybody. I mean, I've taken their car keys away because I won't let them drive drunk. And that doesn't make them happy. So I've had to call the cops when they want to fight me over getting their car keys back. So those are the scenarios that you deal with as a bar owner. There's so
Yeah.
many. Okay. We can only do our best. And like Tyler was saying, we can't put our hands on them. So we are forced to call the cops because the only thing that my security can do, and this is coming from my liability attorney that advises me, this is coming from my insurance company. The only thing that we can do is say, look, if you do not leave, we are going to trespass you. We
Mm.
can't do anything. All we can do at that point, if they don't listen, is call the cops. Okay, so there's a lot to think about when you're, talking about all this. If when
Mhm.
you're a bar owner and you live it, you'd understand. Most people that make the complaints and stuff that they do, they're not bar owners. They don't get it. There's a lot that we deal with. However, we are providing entertainment for people. So when people come here, they expect to have live entertainment, a DJ, whatever. But because we do that, tourists come. I have repeat tourists come to my place because they know when they come into town, they've got something fun to do. Okay. And that helps Reno. And so I understand what people are saying as far as the noise, this and that. But if they're going to move in those areas, that's what they're signing up for. And they need to understand that when they move in. So we can't change all the rules and lose all of our tourists, or change the rules and make all of our people that live here want to leave because they're bored. People will move if they don't get their needs met. We have to be able to offer that to people. And again, we're not Utah. We are Nevada, and people expect that here. So I just wanted to make that input, and I thought everything Tyler said was spot on.
Perfect. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Hey, Rose, you should be able to unmute on your end.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I actually really like Sydney's takes on the matter. I'm actually a new driver. I'm actually a student who goes to Galena High School, but I worked with City of Reno once or twice. And I honestly think that personally, um, nightlife is really important to Reno. I mean, most people tend to live downtown because they want more experiences with nightlife. It is just shown within urban areas in general. I personally think that there should be increased security for bars because I feel like they don't have enough representation a lot of times. And opinion that I had was that I think that from Monday to Friday we should have reduced time for bars to close, but on Saturdays and Sundays there should be an increased amount of time so it's more of an incentive to relax on the weekends. But for those, weekdays, there would most likely be less crashes. Especially because I'm a new driver and I've noticed, especially on the weekends, that yes, there are more crashes, but on the weekdays, there's significantly more because there's more morning drinking rather than nighttime drinking.
Mm.
But that I just wanted to quickly add that in because I thought that was, a interesting opinion. And I also think too that, noise would reduce in the morning as well, most likely. And I don't really see too much noise issues when it comes to like bar use, but that's because I'm kind of young. So I mean, obviously I am not even the drinking age. So, but yeah, I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rose.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we are through everyone that has raised their virtual hand.
Yep, and I don't see anything else in the chat.
Wonderful. And just as a reminder too, next steps, make sure you fill out that survey or send me an email with your individual comments. We'll include all of that. We'll try and summarize the feedback that we're hearing from the community and share that with council and then see kind of what next steps they want to come up with. It's definitely a long process no matter what we do. So don't feel that just because you miss one meeting that you're not going to be able to have a voice. If council does give us direction to move forward with any changes, we will then start, like I said, a good 4 to 6 month process to see what that looks like. But this is that first step. So we appreciate you guys taking your Thursday evening to be with us. And we look forward to hearing more from you over the coming months. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.